For anyone who enjoys listening to advice, as I do, it doesn't mean that I like to follow it. It means I do like to listen to advice. May and June are particularly great months to be alive. You don't have to be a graduate. You don't even have to have a graduate in the family in order to tune into wonderful words of wisdom. I love it, and every year at this time, I listen to commencement speech after commencement speech on YouTube all week long. Ask Dick. See, he's nodding his head. That's what I do. Why? Because bottom line, as we just heard from Carly, these words are all about life. And what is there more important than that? So this morning I will take my turn and I will tell the graduates and anyone else interested what I have learned over the course of the past several decades. I decided to do it by telling you what I learned the hard way. And with great difficulty, I condensed my list to include 3 major life lessons. So here goes. Number 1, it is not always about how well you do, it's what you care about that matters most. Somehow along the line, I bought into the idea that my job was to take a good, long look in life's mirror and to prove both to myself and to everybody else that I was smart. I was never a jock, I wasn't athletic, but I could hold my own on the honor roll. So every quarter I would gaze into the mirror, and like the wicked queen in Snow White, I got used to asking that same question over and over again. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the smartest of them all? As long as I was satisfied with that mirror's answer, I was fine. Life was good. But then the day came when I didn't like the response. And it was as if life had doused me with a bucket of ice water. Using Walt Disney's imagery, I began to dissolve on contact. And then, without realizing what I was doing, I pushed the self-destruct button, and I let perfectionism take its toll. Once I went to college, my relentless cheer was, study some more, harder, harder. And so who was always the first one at the library's door when it opened at 7 a.m.? You're looking at her. And who was the last to leave at 11 p.m.? It was I. In fact, one time while I was reclining on one of the library's cushions, so as to rest my eyes, I woke up in the pitch dark. It was the middle of the night. And never, ever will I forget that harrowing walk amidst the stacks as I tried to find my way out. That is how badly I wanted to do well, to prove myself and everyone else. So over the years, I have learned that when we get it wrong, as I did, God lovingly intervenes to try to show us our foolish ways. But I wasn't open to that. In my case, I just tried harder. But the harder I tried, the more elusive my goal became, and over the semesters, I developed something that I called myself paralysis of the pen. I reached the point where I could barely write a single paragraph because nothing passed my scrutiny. And at that point, I very seriously wondered if my claim to fame would be that I was the family's first college dropout. Yet, by grace and grace alone, I had such a bad case of library fever one time that I knew I needed to get off campus. And so I signed on to do weekly tutoring at a nearby elementary school. And that was when God finally started getting through to me. That it was time to put down that hideous mirror and to look out his window instead. What I discovered was that none of the children there cared if I could write a good paper or not. They were not the least bit interested in my grades. What they cared about was whether or not they would ever be able to learn to read. That was the pressing concern which allowed me to finally start putting things in perspective. And it proved to mark a significant turning point in my life. That choice, to stare into a mirror or to look out a window, is as old as life itself. And I learned the hard way that mirror gazing depletes one of one's strength, whereas when we choose to look out God's window, he empowers us and he gives us the strength to accomplish what he wants to do. Lesson number 2, good luck or bad, only God can say. My all-time favorite fable is the one about the farmer and his son. They own a horse, but one day the horse runs away. "Your horse ran away, what terrible luck!" the neighbors exclaim. "Maybe yes, maybe no," says the farmer. Then, several days later, the horse comes back in the company of several other horses. "What great luck," says the neighbors. "Maybe yes, maybe no," says the farmer. During that next week, the son, in trying to break in one of the mares, was thrown and broke his leg. "Your son broke his leg, what terrible luck," the neighbors cry. "Maybe yes, maybe no," says the farmer. A few weeks later, soldiers marched through the town, recruiting all able-bodied young men to go to war. The farmer's son did not pass muster. "Your boy was spared, what good luck," exclaimed the neighbors. "Maybe yes, maybe no," said the farmer. The moral of the story: nothing that happens in and of itself can we identify as a curse or a blessing. Time will tell. Only God knows. A while back, Dick and I drew up a list of the most painful experiences we had had. At the top of Dick's list was his divorce. But then, as we discussed this, he realized that had he not been divorced, he wouldn't have met me. Or that was a good one. That was a good one. Okay. Now I lost my place. No. So then, moving on, I went through my list, and at the top of my list was my 10-year battle in being bipolar. In the therapy, the medication, those grueling hospitalizations. But then, as I look back at it, in all honesty, I have to say that those miserable, terrible bouts gave me an insider's understanding of what heavy-duty depression feels like. And I would not trade that. So it's a waste of time to continually try to judge the merit of what does or doesn't happen to us, saying this is good or this is bad. With God's help, take your circumstances in stride and try to make the best of whatever comes your way. And the third point, know that God is faithful all the time. To make an analogy, it might be raining where you live right now. You may be standing in the midst of hurricane winds, but that doesn't mean the sun has stopped shining. The first time I went before the Board of Ordained Ministry to become a deacon of the United Methodist Church, I went in for my interview, as ready as I possibly could be. I walked into a room, took a seat before the examiners. Someone asked me one question, which I was all prepared to answer. But at the same time, someone else sitting in that circle noticed that my hand was shaking. Why are your hands shaking? Oh, that's just from my medication. Getting back to the question, what I wanted to say, medication? Why are you on medication? Oh, because I'm bipolar. Well, that was it. The whole rest of the interview was about that, about my experience with manic depression, and needless to say, my application was denied. So, the next year, I tried applying to a different conference, this time to my home state of Minnesota. Surely they will take me. This time, the question and answer period went, I thought, smoothly, until the very end when one of the examiners asked me about how I had liked teaching Sunday school. And I said very much, except that I had some issues with the curriculum, and I explained why. Which curriculum was this? My wife and I wrote that curriculum. End of story. Late that afternoon, I can remember calling home to say that I had been rejected a second time, whereupon I broke down, crying from the depths of my soul, and to my surprise, I sounded very much like a foghorn. I mean, it was just like, huh, huh, huh. And behind it was that conviction, God didn't want me after all. I thought since I was 5, I was called to the ministry. Was this all one big mistake? Well, several months later, in my existential despair, I sought a pastor who served the next town over. I wanted to be anonymous. After a long and very soul-searching conversation, he said one 4-letter word, which for me was life-saving. He said the word, when. He said, when you become a pastor, you will find that God's timing is not always going to be the same as yours. When I become a pastor? He believed in me. He thought I'd someday, somewhere be accepted, and that yes, God could still use me in the ministry. That was what I needed to hear. One vote of confidence. And the rest is history. I was ordained 30 years ago, this very day, June 14th. So, bottom line, remember the wisdom from Sonny, a character in the best exotic Marigold Hotel. Everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, then it's not yet the end. So those are 3 things that I learned the hard way. It's not how well you do, it's what you care about that matters most. Don't try to judge what happens to you. Just put it in God's hand and do your best. And thirdly, know that God is faithful all the time. God bless you. Amen.